Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider. Today is going to be very special. We have Bill Taranto with us, and he's the outgoing co-chairman of GCV Leadership Society, and clearly one of the veteran of corporate venturing who has gone through many challenges and a lot of success too. So we are going to learn a lot from Bill today. Bill, welcome.
Well, thank you, Nicolas. I really appreciate being here. And congratulations on being named the incoming chair of GCV. I think you'll bring a lot to the table, and it's actually a fun thing to do. I quite enjoyed it with Arvind this past year. And again, congratulations.
Thank you. And so, Bill, I'd like to ask, how did you get into corporate venturing as a first question on the podcast? And actually, I don't think I know the answer to that. So I'm looking forward to know, how did you get into corporate venturing?
So I fell into it when I graduated. This will say my age, but I graduated college in 1985. And in 1985, people don't realize that there were actually more jobs than people, unlike today, where I think a lot of the graduating students are struggling to find positions. There's less jobs than people. But when I graduated, lots of jobs. And actually, most people don't know that I wanted to be in advertising. I was a marketing major, and I had interviewed with all the big advertising houses in the US, Deutsche, McCann, and for whatever reason didn't get placed, but I had good grades and everything. And then one of my college friends got placed in banking and called me and said, "Why don't you apply?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not a banker. I'm not that kind of I don't know finance. I don't know anything." And they said, "Well, it's more than that. It's outward thinking. It's people. It's all these different things." And so I did that. I got placed and started my career in banking, and then had the opportunity a number of years later to join Johnson and Johnson. And that's really where I kind of honed, I would say, my investment in venture capital skills. I spent almost 18 years at Johnson and Johnson. And the group I was in there was really interesting. And we built a really interesting practice around investing in some really, I think, standout companies that really drove what J&J was looking for, but the industry. So we weren't just investing on behalf of J&J. We were actually looking at the pharma industry and seeing what could help them. And really, like I said, built a really fabulous practice. And then out of the blue, I got a call from Merck in 2010, and they said, "We love what you're doing at J&J. When I ever considered leaving J&J and coming over." And it was kind of funny because when I was talking to Merck originally, they didn't even have a therapeutic fund. I'm like, "You want to invest in technology before you do therapeutics? You're the only pharma that doesn't have a traditional therapeutic fund." They were doing everything out of corporate development at the time. They're like, "Yeah, we want to do technology, and we really like what you're doing." And it was kind of a great time because almost a whiteboard palette, because Merck didn't know what Merck didn't know in a sense about at least technology corporate venturing piece. And I think really even about general corporate venturing because they weren't doing it. And so I had the ability to go in, and I had a lot of lessons learned from 25 for the 20 years or so I was at J&J about how if I had the opportunity to really structure a corporate venture firm the way I wanted, what would I do differently? And so it started with me just telling Merck, going, "Well, here are like 7 or 8 things that I would like to see happen." And a lot of it was around structure and things I wanted to see. I wanted to bring my staff with me from J&J. I wanted experienced people. I didn't want to have to tin cup it. I wanted the money all up front. I wanted to be responsible for all the decision making where we'll report to a board, but all the strategy and investment thesis was going to be done by our team. We wanted to have experts that were venture capital experts. We want to have the freedom to operate. And I actually wanted to outsource a lot of what we do because I found a lot of times when I was at JJ, you got caught in the corporate machine. You call legal and they can't return your call because they're working on so many other things for the other parts of the corporate. So I wanted to make sure I was able to outsource some of the fundamental functions that maybe made our corporate venture firm lean like an independent or institutional firm. It was really kind of novel back then because no one was structured like that. And I was in April of 2010. So we're now in our 16th year coming up. We're completing our 16th year, about to go to our 17th year of investing. So we're, as you said, we're one of the longest running, at least I would say, that new era of corporate venture fund. I know Arvind's about the same, about 15 years as well for Citi. And I think what was interesting at that time, or also when you just think about corporate venturing, because this I think segues into also how you're thinking about GCV. A lot of positive things have happened over the last 15 years, but there's some negative things too. But a lot of the positive was when I joined Merck, it was the rise of the corporate venture firm. I think when I joined, there was maybe about 400 global corporate venture firms, 300. I was one of the first ones to join GCV. We had 25 members at the very beginning of 2000, that very first year. I think today globally, I don't know how many are members of GCV. There's something like 3,500 or more corporate venture firms on a global basis. So what we saw was the rise of the corporate venture. And I think we've improved how syndicates work from an investment perspective. A nice mixed syndicate is good. We brought lots of capital. We brought the ability to bring a partner, which is your corporate. So there's a lot of positive things we brought. And even we today, tons of capital coming in from the corporate, tons of M&A, tons of consolidation of assets. That's being driven by us as corporates, not necessarily by the institution or the private investor side. I think that's interesting as it's grown. I also think that's changed a little bit. We've seen some closures, right? So it's been hard. And I think a lot of it's due, and this goes back to one of the things I was really looking for when I joined Merck, is one of the mistakes I see some of the corporate venture firms make when they first start is they don't have a well-defined investment strategy and they don't have a well-defined execution strategy. You can't be everything to everybody. You can't do it all. It doesn't work that way. And of course, some are out of their control. Some do really well. We saw Munich Re with, unfortunately, a very successful firm, but for corporate changes. So there's always that other side too, where the corporate shifts and you see a firm close only because the corporate wants to do something different, not because of the firm. But I do like the fact that we're here, we're making an impact as corporates and we're doing a lot of things. And that's kind of what my journey was. I kind of fell into it by accident because back when I graduated, just were trying to find a job and you got a job you could get and it worked for me. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of good mentors, a lot of people that taught me a lot of things. And then being fortunate to work for a corporate today that really supports venture capital, supports what we do, allows us to be free and grow and do the things that we're trying to do on behalf of not only Merck, but but I would say the pharma community who we invest for as well. And just really kind of happy about what happened to me in my career and blessed.
Well, thank you, Bill. And there's so much I'm going to unpack. But for the audience, I also want them to know something which you had presented last year. Many people say the most dangerous part of a CVC, and you alluded to Munich Re Ventures changing the organization, is when the reporting line change, the CEO change. Can you speak to how often that has happened to you?
Yeah. So I've had a really, especially at Merck. So I'm on my third CEO and I'm on my 10th direct boss. One of the big things I learned early in Merck that I probably didn't do as well at the beginning, but we do it really well, is communicate. You've got to learn to communicate across the organization, both up, down, and across. It's not just above you. Merck had a fundamental shift in 2016. We went from a sort of a primary care pharma company to a biologics oncology company. That was a big shift. We didn't change our strategy. Didn't matter. So that's what we were always articulating. Whatever you want to do, Merck, whatever the industry wants to do, our strategy supports that. And we can articulate that to you in a way that you understand. And then I can show you the investments that we've made that support that. So no matter what you're trying to do, we can help you. But we had to communicate that. And as I said at the beginning, one of the mistakes I see corporate venture capital firms make is they don't have a strategy. They don't really have a way to articulate exactly what they're doing. So when they have changes, they try to shift their strategy or shift to whoever's new. And what they should do is try to maintain a fine strategy that is flexible and evolves, but it's sound and fundamental that allows you to progress forward. So I think that's, what's helped us because I've had a lot of changes in leadership.
I think it was important for the audience to appreciate that because when you talk about communication, it's not communication at the beginning. It's throughout the years for 15 years to be consistent. And I like to think about strategy, about what you decide to do and what you decide not to do. But the strategy itself is not enough if you're not good at communicating the strategy and executing on it. And I think you've proven that across so many change of reporting lines and CEOs. And I thought that was quite interesting. Now, I want to talk about the two luxuries I think you got in your career, one in J&J, one in Merck. So the one in J&J, which I think is a luxury, is what you mentioned earlier, which is you were allowed to make mistakes. And so if you think about the audience, now the CEO was thinking about starting a CVC for their corporation. It's very hard to say, hey, be ready that they will make mistakes. But how would you guide that CEO to think the right way about ensuring that the team can deliver, but they still have that context of making mistakes while they learn?
Yeah, I was so fortunate, right? So back in that 98, 2000-ish time frame of 102, corporate venture was not big. It was really new and we were learning, right, as we went along. And I think J&J was learning as we went along, at least from a technology perspective, not from the traditional theory, because they had the venture firm 30 years prior to me even showing up there. But it still was new, right? And I think where you can mitigate some of the issues that happen is first off, making sure you're hiring the right people that know the industry and are talented venture capital people. So what happened to me at Merck was when I brought my team in, they had all been working for me. I brought them all from J&J. We knew healthcare, we knew pharma, and we knew how to invest in healthcare and pharma, right? We were very experienced, and Merck got the luxury of all the learnings we had at J&J, basically. And so, right, if you bring in a talented team, then you're gonna make mistakes, but not as many, right? And I think so you gotta mitigate it a little bit. I think you need to also tell the parent, it's a long game. We're gonna make some good investments, but we're gonna make some not some good investments. But I'm gonna tell you a story, and this gets back to the of why I'm making those investments. There's a reason behind it, which is based on what you're trying to solve for corporate, right? Every corporate has a different reason for having a venture capital firm. And I think you get to make mistakes when you make money. We made money really quickly for Merck at the beginning. Like in the first 3 years, we had exits already. That buys you time to, learn, make mistakes. Because we were still learning Merck, right? Merck was evolving, changing. We were a new fund, but we had to test it still. But we still had to prove it to Merck. After 1 year, they could have got rid of us because they said, oh, this isn't working, right? And so there's a few things I think you have to do, but I think it starts with hiring the right talent that understand the industry, having the quick wins, and that buys you time to make mistakes.
Maybe you're too humble to say, but I think, and it's back to what you said about communicate, which I think you act with transparency, and I know you enough to know that, which I think means you're building trust, which means that mistakes, when they come, they are not total surprise. You've shared about the risk of them. I think there is an element of communication and transparency that also is helping.
I think that's huge. And trust takes time, right? We're 15, 16 years in. The best compliment I ever got was somebody said to me, the executive committee, the board of directors, they don't wake up in the morning worrying about the venture fund because you've built, over time, the trust, the reputation. And of course, if I ever retire, they're going to start worrying about it again because I'm not there anymore, but it's going to go on. But the point but that was built over time, right? With leadership changes, but being able to make sure they understood why we're here, why we're doing what we're doing, why we have these not only successes, but where we're learning, right? How we're improving.
The golden nugget, actually, which is back to the why, back to the strategy. No, it's really well said. I want to shift gear now, talking about GCV. And I think GCV for me is an amazing community, but also mentors. And I am very sure TDK Ventures would not be where it is if I had not joined GCV in 2020 in Montreal, met amazing people willing to help me. And could you speak to why people starting a CVC today will get so much value from joining GCV, from attending the events of GCV, and from engaging with the community?
That's the word right there, community. We're a community. This is our closest thing, if you want to call it a trade organization. We're all corporate venture firms. We all have similar problems, similar things we're trying to solve for. We can learn so much from each other. We do the same thing. We happen to be in different industries, but if you and I sat down and really compared out, we're doing the same thing for the most part. We're trying to solve our company problems, right? And I think that's something we can all learn for, and it's working with the community. So one of the reasons I would say is join is you not only have the ability to go through the GCV Institute, which is a more traditional learning opportunity, but we offer so much mentorship opportunities. And I think that's a great thing is where we can give back. And so I think there's no other place for you to go. You're not going to get it from NVCA, right? That's different. This is your true community. And it's a giving community, I found, right? It's everybody's willing to help. And if you really want to build your GCV with best practices, you're going to learn them from all the different industries. And that's what I like it about too. It's different industries. It's not just healthcare. I learn from everybody, right? But it's all about community. Arvind and I spent a lot of time thinking about community and what we need to do to build that. And I think that's what drives GCV.
Now, if you think about your time as co-chair, I'm going to take over the chairmanship. What it is that you would recommend me to really focus on to make sure that our ecosystem thrives and we bring the value to the full ecosystem, to the entrepreneurs we serve, to the mothership we want to bring maximum value to. What would be your recommendation for me?
Yeah. So one of the things that Arvind and I learned pretty quickly is you can't do everything, right? And what'll happen is you'll get to kind of think about your own agenda. You focus on one or two things the first year that you really want to deliver. One of the big things that Arvind and I focused on, and I think it's one thing that you could, if you want to continue to pick up on, because it's about the community, is I meet a lot of corporate venture firms that aren't members. How do we continue to recruit, right, across all industries to keep building our community, right? I don't know what number Jim's at today, but let's say he was at 1,000. Why are we at 1,500, right? And if all was recruited one firm, new firm in, we'd add 200 or 300 new ones, right? Pretty quickly. And so I think we have to build a community. You also have to have your own agenda, but I would just say one of the key things is do maybe 2 to 3 things and that's it. And take in what everybody's going to give you, but you're going to have to be pragmatic and say, I can't do it. And that's some of these things GCV is not going to do. I always found it funny where they're like, oh, we should lobby. We're not going to be a lobby group. As much as people want us to be a lot, we're not doing that. That's not what GCV does, right? Were some things that you'll see that come out and they're good suggestions, but you have to be pragmatic, but that's not what GCV does, right? So one of the things I would just say, think about is what's something that's actionable, what's not actionable, and then just work on the things that are actionable. Because it took Arvind and I a little bit of time, but we had a lot of pre-meeting. And of course, it's nice we had 2 of us. You can reach out to Arvind and I anytime, and any other of the past leaders, right? I only did 1 year. I think you're doing a 2-year stint, so you have a little more time to drive things. But even in that 2 years, pick the 1 or 2 things that you think are most important, and then just drive those for that 2-year period. Because I feel like I could have done another year now because I don't feel like I finished what I started, but just for timing and everything, I can only do the 1 year. But that's like the recruiting thing and the mentorship thing were so important to Arvind and I, but we didn't finish it. That's being transparent.
And I totally see the recruiting part. And the way I've described it to Jim is I see it as the top of the iceberg, which are the members we keep seeing who want to do well and learn from each other. But we have the bottom of the iceberg who are not members, who don't come, who don't have a chance to bounce ideas, to learn best practices. But you have the bottom of the iceberg. And it's not because they wake up in the morning saying, you know what, I want to be a bad CVC. That's not the case. They just don't have that community and support mechanism to actually be able to, whether it's to deploy best practices or to argue to their mothership what they need to do well.
Yeah, I agree. We have a solid foundation, right? And part of what I've had that to say with Jim is how do we message better too? I don't know what the right messaging necessarily is, but there's a reason they're not joining, right? And maybe it's we're not totally telling them the value proposition that exists. Because I know over time, Jim's floated ideas around, well, maybe we bring in some of the independent. No, this is our community, corporate venture. We should have every corporate venture as part of this, right? It's that simple, but we don't. And I think you're right. How does that bottom half of that iceberg come above the water? And that was where Arvind and I tried to focus. And like I said, we didn't finish it. And I don't know if we did a great enough job, but that was one of our primary focuses was trying to get that done.
I definitively take your feedback and work on it. Bill, I want to thank you for your time. You've been super generous and very candid and reflective today. So I really want to thank you for that.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoy these. And I wish you the best of luck as chairman. But like I said, Arvind and I are here. If you ever need anything, I'll be at the meetings, but I wish you a prosperous 2026. And I look forward to seeing you at the Monterey meeting.
I will see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.